Prophet Muhammad noticed that he lives in a society that downgrade women. They were viewed as second-hand citizens, an object of personal belongings that belong to the man. And that disturbed the Prophet.
Early in his prophetic career, Muhammad condemned female infanticide. Later revelations would give women legal rights in marriage, allow them to divorce, and protect their inheritance rights.
Of course, it's absurd and anachronistic to expect Muhammad to be a feminist in the 21st century sense. But nevertheless, what he did for women in the context of his time was amazing.
Although most women were second-class citizens in pre-Islamic Arabia, Muhammad's own wife, Khadija, was wealthy and powerful.
There's been this idea that women prior to Islam were chattel, that they had no rights. And I think that for many, many levels of the women, that is true. But for a certain level of woman, which Khadija would have been amongst, that is not true.
Khadija is an inspiration because in spite of the male-dominated society that she lived in, she was a working woman. And so there are some parallels for modern women to learn from her example. I grew up in Kashmir, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas in northern India. And I came to America when I was 15 years old. As I started becoming part and parcel of this culture and society, I gravitated towards just wanting to be like everybody else and tended to stray away from my own faith. And for a while there, I went through some very, very dark stages in my life where I wanted nothing to do with my faith. And I almost just walked away from my faith. And as I got older, I recognized that there was this very empty hole inside of me. So I started searching for God in all kinds of places. You know, Rumi has this beautiful story where he says, I looked for God, I went to a temple and I didn't find him there. Then I went to a church and I didn't find him there. And then I went to a mosque and I didn't find him there. And then finally I looked in my heart and there he was. The challenges that I faced in my life are the very same challenges that a lot of young girls are facing. And when they come to me with their questions, I feel like a person who has already traveled the road. I dispense advice to them from real experience as to how I would have dealt with something.
I've noticed how when it comes to women, we are only supposed to marry Muslim men. Why is that now? Especially because the Quran says that believing men and women should marry believing men and women. It doesn't point out that men can marry such and women can't.
I've heard plenty of people say that. In fact, that's interpretation.
Some of the issues are deeply personal. Issues with gender relations like dating and marriage. And other issues have to do with certain Islamic law and how to reconcile with some of those things.
I want to change with her. See, hers is prettier.
And these are all sticky wickets, as we say. The fact that I've walked the walk helps a little bit for me to dispense advice to these people. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah.
In Mecca, opposition to Muhammad was growing. His message of monotheism and his campaign against idolatry threatened the lucrative trade that fueled the Meccan economy.
The business of Mecca is to draw pilgrims to Mecca. They want to make money. And the way they draw pilgrims to Mecca is people come visit their gods. Well, here's somebody who's saying, these gods, they're not real. They're stones. They're rocks. You're wasting your time. Now, that message has economic implications to the Quraysh. They're worried This man is going to undermine our business.
In the tribal system, Muhammad was protected by his uncle, Abu Talib. So the Meccans went to Abu Talib and asked him to turn Muhammad over to them.
Abu Talib was in a difficult position. He was not a Muslim. But it went against the grain for him to simply hand over his beloved nephew to these people who would kill him with impunity. So he took Muhammad to one side and said, look, don't do this to us. Can't you just keep quiet?
And at that point, the Prophet says, if they put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, I will not stop preaching what I am preaching until this message is conveyed or I die conveying it. And this is what he tells his uncle. And at that point, he begins to weep. And his uncle looks at him and realizes the depth of the conviction of this man. And he says, say whatever you want. You have my protection.
One of the things that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us was that it is our duty to try to correct injustices in the world. And if you see something wrong, change it with your hands. If you're not able to, then speak out against it. And if you're not able to do that, then feel bad about it in your heart. But that is the weakest form of faith. Wherever possible, the Muslim should try to take action and not let an injustice go by without calling it what it is and asking for change.
All right, what do we have?
Books prepared for the week.
Dealing with change is part of Jamil Johnson's job. As chief of staff for Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York, he manages the congressman's schedule and briefs him on policy issues.
The biggest problem with the bill is that there's the issue of discrimination using federal funds. Because it's not like a private grant.
You're telling me that you recommend a no vote.
I'm recommending a no vote. As we had said in the beginning, I'm going to give you the technical part and what I think the issue is. You take care of the politics.
Good deal. What else we have?
My goal is not necessarily to simply seek votes or campaign money or to be accepted as a part of the game. As Muslims, we must seek justice. So what I try to do is educate. In many cases, the best thing that you're able to do with that kind of education is decrease prejudice and increase understanding. If I practice my Islam on the job and do that without trying to interfere with anyone else's practices, whether they be religious or otherwise, then I make it easier for the next Muslim that comes on board. Especially also if I do a good job, because then some of the prejudice, some misunderstanding goes away.
One of the narrations.
Johnson coordinates the Friday prayer service, or Jummah, on Capitol Hill.
It's grown since we started it. Used to be sometimes 3, 5, 10 of us. Now there can be up to 40, 50 people. We're busting out of the room that we're in. It's kind of a re-energizing, kind of refilling our fuel tank with faith again for the rest of the week.
The image of the messenger gives us an example of somebody who was extremely successful as a head of state. Nevertheless, he never had to compromise his integrity.
One of the most important things for a Muslim is remaining constantly in remembrance of Allah. What we are commanded to do is that we make formal prayer 5 times a day. Because when you live in a society that constantly gives you acceptance and praise because of material things or achievement, we need that constant remembrance of Allah in order to kind of bring us back to the right path. As some say, keeping our eyes on the prize. And prayer is that remembrance. Even though Islam isn't the biggest faith in America, even though it's sometimes just ridiculed, The fact of the matter is that I can practice. I can make my 5 prayers a day. It was much harder for the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions to do this.